It was supposed to be just another typical day. The kind where you wake up, go to work, and then come home. Life was normal, maybe a little too normal, but that's the way I liked it. My name is Jake Parker. I'm a small business owner just trying to make a living. I've always kept to myself, avoided drama, and tried to do things the right way. But you know what they say about life, it has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. It all started when I received an email. At first, I didn't think much of it. It looked like just another generic message from a law firm, a "we can help you" kind of thing. But as I read it, my blood ran cold. They had copies of private documents. Information about my business, my personal life, things that only a select few would have known. The email accused me of embezzling funds, of fraud, and of ruining lives. They were threatening to expose everything unless I paid them. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process what was happening. It wasn't just a scam. This was real. They had everything, the documents, the details, the evidence. At that moment, I realized someone was out to destroy me. Someone was willing to go to great lengths to bring me down. I wasn't the type to panic, but this was different. This was my reputation, my life. They weren't just attacking me, they were trying to ruin everything I had worked for. And worse, I had no idea who they were or why they were targeting me. I thought about my employees, my clients, people who trusted me. If the things they were claiming were true, I could lose everything. The money, the business, the respect I had earned over the years. It was all at risk, and the worst part? It was happening because of lies. I took a deep breath and closed the email. I couldn't let fear control me. I couldn't let them win. I had to fight back. I didn't know who was behind this, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them destroy me. No, I was going to expose them. I was going to turn the tables. And I was going to make them regret ever thinking they could take me down. But first, I needed to dig deeper. I needed to figure out who was behind this and how they knew so much about me. The first step was simple: trace the email. I wasn't going to let them just get away with it. They had tried to destroy me, but instead I was going to destroy their entire scheme. The first thing I did after closing that email was grab my phone. I had to make sure my business accounts were secure. I spent the next hour going through every transaction, every line of code on the website, and every document I had access to. Nothing seemed out of place, at least not at first glance. But there was something about the way the email was written, something that didn't sit right with me. I decided to do what I do best: investigate. I had connections in the tech world, people who could help me trace emails, digital footprints, anything that could point me in the right direction. But after hours of digging, the trail went cold. The email had been sent through a proxy server, carefully hidden to avoid detection. Whoever was behind this was skilled, very skilled. But that wasn't going to stop me. I couldn't just let them walk away scot-free. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed a bigger picture. Who would benefit from ruining my life like this? Who had a motive to go to such lengths? I started making a list of potential enemies, former employees, business rivals, and anyone who might have something to gain from seeing me fail. That's when it hit me. I had recently made a major acquisition, a deal that had shaken up the local market. It wasn't a huge acquisition in the grand scheme of things, but it had turned some heads. I had pushed out a competitor, a rival who had been eyeing that same target for years. The more I thought about it, the more I realized, what if this was payback? I picked up the phone again. This time, I called my lawyer, Michael. He was the only one I trusted with the weight of what was going on. I needed someone who could help me take legal action and who could also provide guidance as I started digging into the people behind this attack. After a few minutes of explaining the situation, Michael told me the next step was to keep a close eye on my business operations and document everything. We also needed to think about what kind of evidence would hold up in court. But the most important part, he said, was to stay calm. Don't rush into things. We'll make sure you're protected. I wasn't about to wait around, though. I couldn't afford to let things get out of control. If I was going to fight back, I needed to stay 2 steps ahead of whoever was behind this. I spent the next few days gathering data, reviewing the business dealings from the past year. I started making connections between transactions that seemed unrelated at first, but with each connection, the puzzle started coming together. Then, one afternoon, something clicked. As I was reviewing a meeting summary from a business deal I had closed months ago, I found a name I recognized. It wasn't much, just a small mention in the notes, but it was enough to make my heart race. It was someone who had been part of the deal I'd made with the acquisition. Someone who had been on the opposing side but had backed out at the last minute. I couldn't believe it. Ryan Westbrook. A businessman with a reputation for being ruthless and, by all accounts, someone who wouldn't hesitate to go after what he wanted. It made perfect sense now. He had been the one pushing me out of that deal. the one who had tried to force my hand into selling, into giving up. And when that didn't work, he decided to go after me in the most personal way possible by using my own name against me. I wasn't just dealing with a competitor now. I was dealing with a man who would do anything to win, even if it meant breaking the law. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not now, not ever. Ryan thought he could destroy me, but instead he had made the biggest mistake of his life. I wasn't just going to sit back and let him ruin everything I'd worked for. I was going to expose his entire scheme, tear down the walls he'd built, and make sure he would never get away with it. The plan was clear. I had the evidence. I had the motive. Now it was time to bring it all into the light. It was time to make my move. The pieces were all in place. Ryan Westbrook, the man behind this whole scheme, had no idea that I had been following the trail he'd left behind. Every email, every transaction, every piece of evidence that had fallen into my hands over the last few days painted a clear picture. Ryan had been trying to destroy me from the start. I knew that if I was going to take him down, I needed more than just evidence. I needed to catch him in the act, expose his entire operation, and make sure he would never be able to manipulate anyone else again. I spent the next few days preparing. I didn't tell anyone about my plan, not even Olivia. She had been my rock through all of this, but I couldn't risk her being caught in the crossfire. She knew I was working on something, but I couldn't let her in on the full details just yet. This was going to be a delicate operation, and I needed to stay focused. The first step was getting Ryan's attention. I knew he'd been watching me closely, but he hadn't expected me to turn the tables. I set up a meeting with one of his business partners, someone I knew had been indirectly involved in the scheme. The goal was to get Ryan to think that I was desperate enough to make a deal. I wanted him to think I was on the ropes, that I was willing to give up everything. The meeting was set for the following week. I knew Ryan would be behind the scenes, pulling the strings. But I wasn't worried. I had a plan. When the day arrived, I walked into the conference room with confidence. I could see Ryan's partner, Greg, sitting at the table, looking tense. But Ryan was nowhere to be seen. I knew that Ryan loved to control everything, so his absence meant he was watching from somewhere else. "Mr. Parker," Greg said, standing up and extending his hand. "Glad you could make it. We've been waiting for this discussion for a while." I smiled, shaking his hand firmly. "I'm glad too, Greg. I think we can make this work." But inside, I was already one step ahead. I knew that this meeting would be the perfect opportunity to send Ryan a message. A message that I was in control now. As we sat down and discussed the terms of the deal, I noticed a few things, subtle things, that told me Ryan was watching. Greg's nervous glances, the way he kept checking his phone, the hesitation in his voice. He wasn't sure what I knew, but I could tell that the pressure was starting to mount. I leaned forward slightly, making sure to look Greg in the eye. "You know, Greg," I said slowly, "I've been doing some digging, and what I found might surprise you." He looked up, his face paling. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. I smiled. "I know about the fake transactions. I know about the money that's been funneled through my accounts. And I know that Ryan Westbrook is behind it all." Greg's eyes widened. He quickly looked around the room, making sure no one was listening. "You have no proof of that," he said, his voice shaking. I pulled out a folder from my briefcase and slid it across the table. "Here's the proof, Greg," I said calmly. "Every transaction, every phone call, every email. I have everything. And I'm not alone. I've got my lawyer, my investigators, and soon, I'll have the law on my side." Greg's face turned an ashen color. He didn't say anything for a moment, and I could see the panic in his eyes. I had him, but I wasn't done yet. Before he could speak, I continued, "You can either walk away and let this go, or you can stand by Ryan and face the consequences. The choice is yours." Just as I finished speaking, the door to the conference room opened. Ryan Westbrook himself walked in, his expression cold and calculated. He had been listening the entire time, but he was no longer in control. I had turned the tables. Ryan didn't sit down. Instead, he paced around the room, trying to maintain his composure. "You think you've won, Jake?" he sneered. "You think you can bring me down with a few documents? You're playing a dangerous game." I stood up, facing him directly. "No, Ryan. I'm not playing a game. You are. And it's time for everyone to see who you really are. You thought you could ruin me. You thought you could destroy my life. But instead, I've exposed everything." Ryan's expression faltered for the first time. The walls he had built up around him started to crack, and I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. He was no longer the puppet master. Now he was the one on the ropes. The meeting ended abruptly. Greg didn't say a word. Ryan stormed out of the room, his face twisted in fury. I could tell the battle wasn't over, but the first move had been made. And this time, the game was mine. The day after the meeting, I thought I would feel relief. After all, I had exposed Ryan Westbrook's scheme, and I had taken back control. But instead, a sense of unease settled over me. It wasn't over yet. I had made the first move, but there was still so much to do. Ryan wouldn't go down without a fight. I spent the next few days watching my back. I knew Ryan wasn't going to let this slide easily. He was the kind of man who always found a way to turn things in his favor. And while I had won the first round, the war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't hear from him immediately after our confrontation in the meeting. But then the phone calls started. At first, they were vague, seemingly innocent questions. "Hey Jake, how's business? Hope everything's going well." But I knew better. I knew they were feelers, trying to figure out where I stood, trying to gauge if I was bluffing or if I actually had the upper hand. And then there was the email. It was short, a simple message with a cryptic subject line. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I clicked it open, and my eyes narrowed as I read through it. It was a threat, but it wasn't just any threat. It was a warning from someone I didn't know. Someone who seemed to have connections to Ryan. They told me to back off. They told me to stay quiet or face the consequences. At that moment, something inside me clicked. Ryan wasn't just a businessman. He was a dangerous man, willing to go to any lengths to protect his empire. And now he was sending someone else after me. I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. If Ryan thought I would be intimidated, he was wrong. I had already lost everything once before, and I wasn't going to let him take it from me again. I turned to Michael, my lawyer, and filled him in on the situation. "They're making moves," I told him. "Ryan's desperate, and I'm not sure who he's bringing into this. But we need to be ready. We need to be prepared for anything." Michael's response was calm, but I could tell he was concerned. "We'll file for protection. We'll make sure everything is documented. And we'll be ready for any backlash." But I knew that wasn't enough. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. This was about staying 2 steps ahead, about outsmarting Ryan at his own game. I decided to take a more aggressive approach. I started gathering more evidence. I dug deeper into Ryan's finances, his business dealings, and even his personal life. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was preparing to take him down once and for all. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep his corruption ran. I had a choice to make. I could back off and let things slide, risk losing everything again, or I could go on the offensive. And if I was being honest with myself, there was no way I could walk away now. I had already come this far, and I wasn't going to let Ryan's threats or tactics intimidate me. But I wasn't going to do it alone. I reached out to a trusted investigator, someone who had helped me in the past. I told him what I needed: access to Ryan's business records, surveillance of his known associates, and anything that could tie him to the illegal activities I suspected. The plan was simple. Get everything I could, build the case, and when the time came, I would bring it all to light. As the days passed, I watched closely, staying vigilant. I didn't know when or how Ryan would strike next, but I was ready for whatever came my way. Then the unthinkable happened. I got a call from one of my employees, Mia, who had been with me for years. She sounded panicked, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Jake, I don't know what's going on, but someone's been asking about you. They've been going through the office records, asking questions about you and your business." My stomach dropped. It was happening. Ryan was coming for me, and he was using his connections to get to me through my own people. But this time, I wasn't going to let him. I told Mia to be careful and to report anything unusual. Then I hung up and made a quick call to Michael. "It's happening," I said, my voice hard. "We need to act now." I wasn't going to wait any longer. I was done playing defense. It was time to take the fight to Ryan and expose everything. The game had changed, and now the tables were turning in my favor. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. My entire life had been shaken to its core, but now, for the first time, I was the one in control. Ryan and his crew thought they could intimidate me, break me down, and destroy everything I had built. They were wrong. The plan was simple. Gather irrefutable evidence, expose Ryan's crimes, and take him down. I couldn't afford to wait anymore. Time was running out, and with every move I made, I knew Ryan would be getting desperate. I had to strike first. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could. Documents, recordings, and photographs. I had hired a team of investigators to dig deeper into Ryan's business empire, and the more they uncovered, the darker his world seemed. There were money laundering operations, shady deals with corrupt government officials, and a tangled web of illegal transactions. But the most damning piece of evidence I found was a series of emails linking Ryan directly to organized crime. But I didn't want just the evidence. I wanted to hit him where it hurt the most, his reputation. I wanted to expose everything he had done, to make sure that not only would he face legal consequences, but his life would be shattered, just like he tried to shatter mine. I couldn't do it alone, though. I called in Michael, my lawyer, and laid out my plan. "We're going to make this public," I said firmly. "We're going to take down his entire operation." Michael was skeptical at first, but he quickly realized I had everything I needed. The evidence was airtight, and with the right connections, we could make sure it all came to light. I had made my move, and now it was time to let the world know who Ryan really was. We decided to go through the press. It was risky, but it was the best way to ensure Ryan couldn't bury the truth. We worked with a journalist who had been covering corporate corruption for years. She was known for exposing the dirtiest secrets of powerful men, and she had the reach to get the story out to the masses. The day the story broke was the day Ryan's world started to crumble. The headlines read, "Local businessman linked to money laundering and organized crime. Tycoon Ryan Westbrook under investigation for illegal business practices. Exposed. The corruption and lies of Ryan Westbrook." I watched as the news spread like wildfire. Ryan's name was everywhere. His dirty secrets were laid bare for the world to see. The media had picked up on the story, and it wasn't long before law enforcement was involved. Investigations were launched, and his assets were frozen. He had no escape. As the news continued to unfold, I got a call from the journalist who had helped break the story. "Jake," she said, "I think you've done more than just expose him. I think you've destroyed him. His company is being investigated, and there are already talks of criminal charges. This is bigger than we thought." I could hear the satisfaction in her voice, but I wasn't done yet. I needed to make sure Ryan would never come back from this. I needed him to understand that no matter how far he went, there would always be someone who would bring him down. A few days later, I got a call from Ryan. His voice was different now, desperate, pleading. "Jake, you don't have to do this. Please. Let's settle this. We can fix this. We can make a deal." I laughed to myself. The man who had tried to destroy me was begging for a deal. "It's too late for that, Ryan," I said coldly. "You had your chance. And now you'll face the consequences of your actions." There was silence on the other end, and then Ryan spoke again, his voice low. "You don't know who you're dealing with. You have no idea what I'm capable of." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already won. Ryan had tried to ruin me, but instead I had exposed him for the criminal he was. He had underestimated me. And now he was facing the consequences of his own greed and arrogance. I hung up the phone and sat back, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I had done what I set out to do. Ryan's empire was collapsing, his life was falling apart, and I was finally free from the shadow he had tried to cast over me. In the weeks following the media storm, everything changed. Ryan's empire was in ruins. His companies were being investigated, and his personal life was exposed for the world to see. As much as I had wanted to savor the moment of victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed Ryan for the fraud he was, I had taken back what was mine, and I had proven that I was more than the victim of his scheme. But now I had to face something even more daunting, rebuilding my life. The business, my career, my reputation, they had all been affected, and though the public's opinion was swayed in my favor, there was a long road ahead. I couldn't afford to be complacent. I had already lost everything once, and I wasn't about to let that happen again. It wasn't easy. The pressure of starting over, of regaining the trust of my clients and colleagues weighed on me every day. But I wasn't backing down. I had already faced the worst, and I was still standing. That alone gave me the strength to continue. Olivia had been my rock throughout the whole ordeal. She had seen me at my lowest, and she had stayed by my side. The more we spent time together, the more I realized that she wasn't just a part of my recovery, she was part of my future. She made me feel like I could finally let go of the past and start fresh. One evening, after another long day of rebuilding the company, we sat on the couch together, sipping wine. The silence between us wasn't awkward, just comfortable. I turned to her, looking into her eyes for the first time in weeks with a sense of peace. "I don't know what I would have done without you," I said quietly. "Through all of this, you've been the one constant." She smiled softly, her hand resting on mine. "I've always believed in you, Jake. I knew you would get through this." That night, I thought about everything I had lost, but I also thought about everything I had gained. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had grown stronger, smarter, and more resilient. But more than that, I had learned to trust again, to open myself to the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by my past mistakes. A few months later, the company was slowly recovering. The press had moved on to other stories, but my name was still linked to one of the biggest exposés in the business world. I had gotten my life back, but now I was building something even bigger, something that would make sure Ryan's actions didn't define my legacy. But just as I thought things were settling down, I received an unexpected call. It was from a private investigator I had hired years ago, someone I trusted to keep an eye on things while I focused on rebuilding. "Jake," he said, his voice steady but urgent, "there's something you need to know." I felt my stomach tighten. "What is it?" "I've been keeping track of Ryan," he continued. "And he's not done. He's trying to rebuild, and this time he's going after something much bigger." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "What do you mean?" "He's targeting someone close to you, Jake. He's making moves, and you need to be prepared. Ryan won't stop. He's just getting started." My heart pounded in my chest. Even after everything I had done, Ryan wasn't finished. And that meant neither was I. The battle wasn't over. But this time, I wasn't just going to fight for my survival. I was going to make sure Ryan would regret ever thinking he could destroy me. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even him, take away what I had worked so hard to rebuild. The days after the call were filled with tension. Ryan Westbrook was still out there, still lurking in the shadows, trying to reclaim what he had lost. I couldn't relax. I couldn't take my foot off the gas. Every moment, every decision could be the difference between protecting everything I had built and losing it all again. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. Not ever again. I called in Michael and a few of my most trusted allies. It was time to prepare for the final confrontation. I couldn't just sit back and wait for Ryan to make his move. I had to strike first, and this time I needed to do it in a way that would ensure he could never come after me again. I started by digging deeper into his recent activities. With the help of my private investigator, I learned that Ryan was in the process of trying to reclaim his lost assets. But his new plan wasn't just about money. It was personal. He was targeting those who had once worked with him, people who knew too much, and now he was using them to try to leverage his way back into the game. He was trying to start a new venture, using the same underhanded tactics that had gotten him in trouble in the first place. I couldn't let him succeed. Not after everything he had done. The plan was simple. I had the evidence, Ryan's illegal transactions, his ties to organized crime, his fraudulent dealings, everything I needed to bring him down. But this time I wasn't just going to expose him to the press or hand over the evidence to the authorities. No, this time I was going to confront him directly, face to face. I set up a meeting with him under the guise of wanting to talk about a potential settlement. I knew this was risky, but I also knew that it was the only way to catch him off guard. If I could make him think he was getting something out of this, I could get him to admit to his wrongdoings. I could get him to reveal the full extent of his operation. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I spent the next few days preparing myself mentally for what was to come. I knew this was it, the final confrontation. The moment that would either make or break everything. I couldn't afford to let my guard down, even for a second. The day arrived and I walked into the conference room, my heart racing but my mind clear. Ryan was already sitting at the table, his usual arrogant smirk in place. He didn't know it yet, but I had him exactly where I wanted him. "Jake," he said, his voice smooth but with an edge of suspicion. "I was surprised to hear from you. What's this all about?" I smiled. "I think it's time we settle things, Ryan. Once and for all." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I took a seat across from him, my gaze steady and unwavering. "I know what you've been up to," I said slowly, watching his expression change. "I know about the illegal deals, the money laundering, the crimes you've committed. I've got all the evidence, Ryan. And I'm not going to stop until you pay for everything you've done." Ryan's face turned pale. The cocky attitude he had carried so effortlessly was gone in an instant. He leaned back in his chair, trying to regain control, but I could see the panic in his eyes. You think you've won? He spat, his voice growing colder. You think you can destroy me with a few documents? You have no idea who you're dealing with, Jake. I've made enemies who can bury you in an instant. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. I've already destroyed everything you've worked for, Ryan. And the only thing you're going to walk away with is your own downfall. The silence between us was thick with tension. For the first time, Ryan didn't have the answers. He didn't have a plan. And I could see that realization dawning on him. I have nothing left to lose, Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll make sure you regret this. I didn't flinch. I already know what's coming, Ryan. But it doesn't matter. Because when the truth comes out, there's nothing you can do to hide it. The meeting ended shortly after that. I had said everything I needed to say. The ball was in motion and there was no turning back now. In the days that followed, I filed the final pieces of evidence with the authorities. The investigation was launched, and this time Ryan had nowhere to hide. His empire was falling apart, his associates turning on him, and he was facing the consequences of his actions. I watched as his world crumbled. The public was outraged, the media was relentless, and Ryan's reputation was destroyed. But for me, it wasn't about watching him suffer. It was about making sure no one ever had the chance to destroy me again. As the months passed, life began to return to normal. My business recovered and I rebuilt my relationships with those who had supported me. But most importantly, I had learned a valuable lesson. No matter how dark the road may seem, there's always a way out. And when life throws everything it has at you, you fight back. You expose the lies, you stand tall, and you never give up. It had been several months since the storm had passed. Ryan Westbrook's downfall was complete, and I had reclaimed my life in a way I never thought possible. But while the battle had ended, the journey of rebuilding and moving forward was just beginning. I had fought hard to expose the truth, to take down a man who thought he could destroy me, but what came next wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about taking what was left and using it to create something even better. After everything, I still had the foundation of my business. It was still mine, and now it was stronger than ever. But I knew I had to approach it differently. I had to evolve. The things I had learned through all of this, trust, resilience, and the importance of having a plan, were lessons I couldn't ignore. Olivia was still by my side, and in many ways, she had been the constant that kept me grounded through it all. She never once asked me to do anything but be myself, and in return, I promised to do my best to build something with her, something that would be ours. We spent countless hours working together, rebranding the company, redefining our goals, and setting the tone for a future we were both excited about. It wasn't about competing anymore. It wasn't about trying to survive or make up for lost time. It was about creating something we could be proud of. A business based on integrity, not deception. But there was something else. As I continued to rebuild, I found myself thinking more about the future. Not just the company, but my future. What kind of life did I want to lead now? What kind of legacy did I want to leave behind? I started working with young entrepreneurs, mentoring them on the importance of ethical business practices. I shared my story with them, how a man tried to take everything from me and how I turned that experience into something positive. It wasn't just about making money. It was about making a difference. And I wanted to pass that on. One evening, while Olivia and I were enjoying a quiet dinner in the new office, I looked at her, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of the past. I wasn't haunted by betrayal. I wasn't worried about what came next. I was here. And I was happy. I think we've done it, I said, a smile tugging at my lips. I think we've finally built something that's ours. Something we can be proud of. She smiled back, her eyes filled with pride. You did it, Jake. You're the one who turned everything around. And I'm just glad to be here with you. I looked out the window, watching the city lights sparkle in the distance. There was still so much to do, so many opportunities ahead of us, but I knew now that I had the strength to face whatever came my way. The past didn't define me anymore. The mistakes, the betrayals, they were part of my story, but they didn't control me. I did. As I looked forward to the future, I realized that the journey was far from over. It was just beginning. And whatever happened next, I knew I was ready for it. Because in the end, it wasn't about being destroyed. It was about rising. And that was exactly what I had done. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after everything fell apart? What did it take for you to move forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be just what someone else needs to hear today. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, strength, and taking back control, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring journey. Let's keep moving forward together. Thank you for being a part of this community. Your support means the world.